Welcome to the Lighthouse Financial Advisors Money Over 50 podcast with Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Lighthouse Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Money Over 50. Today's topic is 5 reasons that couples argue over money.
Thanks,
Dallas,
Michael.
This is your
baby.
baby?
My baby for today. I laugh because this is a second attempt at Michael's introduction. The first time he said 5 reasons couples fight over money, and then we had to clarify that because every time we have a couple that is in our office and they are fighting over money, one of them will say, "We're not fighting, we're discussing this." So maybe we should have said 5 reasons couples discuss in a very fiery way their money.
It's funny, I just had a flashback of this, watching this, I can't remember the name of the show, but it was an English show about a family, and the little girl, she's a cheeky little thing, she's about 8 or 9 years of age, and she was having this discussion with her father, and he said, "We're not having an argument," and she says, "I say we are, you say we aren't. That's an argument." I had to laugh.
So, as you said, this is kind of my topic for today, and I actually had written this down a while ago and said 5 reasons that couples argue over money. I feel as though maybe I've plagiarised this from somewhere because these reasons are really well worded and sort of well thought out, which doesn't sound like how I would have written this down. So if someone out there has actually written this article somewhere where I've read this, then I apologise for plagiarising, but I just thought these are pretty well what we see day to day.
We'll find out, because I'm going to play the part of the interviewer and I'm going to say words to the effect, "Dallas, what do you mean by that?" So the first reason that we, and this should, I feel like I should put a warning at the start of this, that these are just the things that we see in our office day to day of things that couples argue about. It's like, we're not marriage counsellors, we're not psychologists. We don't know why this happens, and we don't really know how to fix it. But I think the first step with a lot of these things is to diagnose what's happening, why a lot of people we see are arguing over their money between them. Yeah, no, it's a good point, and it's just raised another issue. Like, when people often say to me, couples that often say to me, "Geez, it was good to talk to you and get all this out in the open." And I haven't even tried to get anything out in the open, like you said. I'm not
you're a financial
counsellor, but I think the process of actually sitting down, and talking through your decisions with a third party, is
very valuable.
Is very
for a lot of couples.
Very helpful. I mean, if you actually dedicated the time, even without
that's right.
myself there, yourself there,
you would.
If you actually sat down undistracted and
as a couple,
and discussed some of the issues formally, you would probably get the same result. It would be.
I mean, this is probably what you've seen as well in your own marriage, that I have. We have. I'm not immune to this in our own marriage, of different things that we argue about as it relates to money. If I look at this list, most of them, I'm not immune to that, and a lot of the time, that having a formal discussion or having a time to actually talk about this and discuss it, my wife and I can resolve all these different issues. It's just making a time to sit down and communicate and talk through these things that you come up with a resolution. But these are sort of all things that are just happening in the background of your day to day, and it's a bit like we see in a lot of our with a lot of not just couples but people in general, is that we sort of get on the treadmill of day to day life, and we're not really intentional about the way that we think about our money, the way that we spend our money, and what we do with our money. And so it's really about it's a very valuable thing to take the time to actually sit down and work through and really think about what it is you're trying to achieve.
So we might use yourself and Nicola as an example here because
she'll hate this.
because Susie and I we never argue over money.
Yeah.
She just outsources that to me
So,
completely. It's I wouldn't say it was complete trust. It would just be laziness on her behalf.
She'd be the first one.
We argue about other things like the cleanliness of the house and how much stuff gets brought into the house because I'm a minimalist, and she tends to be the opposite of that. So we argue about those types of things, but we never argue about money. So
this would be one where, this is exactly one where Nicola would say, we don't argue about money, we discuss money.
So the first point that you got here down is values not aligned. So
and
tell me what your thoughts are there.
That's one of those things where, and it's probably, I think most people see that in a lot of aspects of your life, is that if your values are aligned, or if you're clear about your values and what's important to you, it's then a lot easier to work out between the two of you what you are going to focus on, what you are, especially financially. We've all got limited resources. There's only so much money that we have to spend now and in the future, all that kind of thing. If there's something that's really important to one member of the couple and the other person just doesn't care about it at all, there's automatically going to, and unless you work through that and actually diagnose what the difference is in your values or in what you put importance on, you end up having arguments without really knowing what you're arguing about, and it becomes a bit of, well, you spent this money on this and you spent money on that. And so the values being aligned thing, the big one that I see with couples is not necessarily that you have to have the same attitude towards money. You know, you don't have to both want to spend money in the same way. It's really just more about being able to discuss that and get your point across as to what you see as a member of that couple, what you see as very important and what you see value in spending money on. And as we, if you've done that, then you're at least then talking about what's important to you. You're not having arguments about things that don't matter, if that makes sense.
Absolutely,
yeah. And I think that values is probably there's a heap of different words that you could use to describe that. Another one that I see similar to values is that, I guess, what I'd consider your time focus. So we've talked about this before, where some people are extremely future focused, some people are very present focused. And so again, using myself as an example, I'm an extremely future focused person, and sometimes to my own detriment, that it's hard for me to spend money in the present day and just enjoy that and not worry about the future. And that's something where, as I said, Nicola and I would be different. She is much more focused on the present and not as worried about the future. So I have to be aware of the fact that that's a difference between us. Otherwise, we're just constantly butting heads about me wanting to save more for the future and her wanting to spend money now. And so it's not necessarily that, in our case, the things that we want to spend money on, we're aligned on that. We both want to travel, we both enjoy that. We're not as focused on new cars or sort of those types of things. So our values are aligned, but it's not just about your values, it's also about your time focus of what's important to you. So for me, saving for the future and getting into a very good financial position is probably more important than, and like I say, sometimes I go too far that way rather than enjoying the present day. But it's really, that's probably I guess a difference in values or a difference in perspective that we need to get aligned as to how we actually see the world before we can diagnose that.
The pennies just dropped for me.
Yeah.
In that, the saying that opposites attract, and people that say that always say it as if it's a really good thing. And I've always wondered, why is it a good thing?
Yeah,
but
that's exactly right.
I was just thinking, in your example there, if you were both the same,
I'd be the biggest miserable old curmudgeon in the world.
If you're both the same as you wouldn't be getting any enjoyment now.
No, I'd be the richest man in the cemetery.
And you'd both be like that. If you were both the same as Nicola, then you wouldn't have 2 cents to rub together.
Exactly right. And that's exactly right.
So like being at those polar opposites and actually forcing... Yeah. It's good for her, it's good for you.
Yes.
Because you do meet in the middle there.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I mean, is it's not to say that you have to agree or that you have to
both have the same perspective on money or on the world. It's really just about realising where you may be different and being, I guess, self-aware enough to know how you sort of see the world.
Point two. The next reason is that...
You're struggling there with my dodgy handwriting, aren't you?
I'm trying to read on a piece of paper. So point two is that one member of the couple may feel as though their work or their contribution isn't being respected or valued.
Yep. That's one that I guess most of the time, I think that's probably not as common by the time people come in to see us in their 50s. I think it's probably, I don't know whether this is more of a, I think in younger couples, I used to see more of this in younger couples, but now that we're working strictly with people in their 50s and 60s, most couples have been together for a fair while and they've kind of worked this out and they have a very clear picture of what they both bring to the table. But it is something that does pop up, and the way this is worded is that I think this is probably more of an issue, is that it's not generally that someone in the couple doesn't respect the other one's contribution. So it's not normally that someone in the couple feels like they're working harder than the other one. It's normally just that someone feels as though their contribution isn't being respected. Because if you actually stopped and said, if you've got a husband and wife and he's working full time and she's taken time off to raise the kids, if you ask the husband, do you value that contribution to the family that your wife, they would, unless they're a real piece of work, they're going to say, no, that's, I really respect that and I really value that and I'm glad that she's done that, and I wouldn't have been able to do that. It's more just that what you see is that because we're not talking about this and we're not discussing it day to day, it's I guess a bit of a resentment or a feeling that can build up where we feel as though that contribution isn't being respected, more so than it necessarily not being respected.
There's one of the points here that we're going to get to is relates to communication. So I think without giving it away, even the first 2 points that we've raised here come down to communication, don't they? A lot of the things that in your head, and you assume that
the other person
knows.
Yes.
That's where we often have disagreements in other areas.
Well, how many times have you had a meeting with someone where there's been a couple where one of them earns significantly more than the other, and the lower earning member of the couple will say, I feel bad because I'm not bringing as much money in as the other person, and the higher earning person always goes, what are you talking about? That I don't care. I'm happy to.
Well, that's actually been us in the last few years. So we have Richie's just about turned 4, and Margot's just turned 2. So in the last 4 years, that's been our relationship. Susie hasn't done much teaching work. She's a school teacher. She's done a little bit here and there, and then every now and again she'll say, I feel really bad for spending that money, and I say, what are you talking about?
That's right, exactly.
You're raising 2 young children, which I used to think would be an easy job. However, and after having done it, because there's times where I have to look after them, of course, on my own. And it is the toughest job. I can't wait to get back to work. I love spending time with my kids. Don't get me wrong, but
it's true. But you're exactly right. It's those thoughts that are normally in your head. No one, like I say, unless you're a real piece of work, no one's sitting there begrudging their wife who's staying home with the kids, going, she's not doing much. She's sitting on the couch watching TV.
No.
You've only got to spend a bit of time.
I've actually had to talk her out of taking an extra day. So her school keeps calling her and saying, will you take on 2 permanent days and 3 permanent days, and I've told her, no, knock it back. Well, you can't. We just can't fit it for the little bit of extra money at this stage. For me, it doesn't make sense to do that because it won't be too long before they're both at school. And then she can do 4 or 5 days a week then, or 3 or 4 days, or whatever she decides to want to work. But right now, it's
but you make a good point there, that it's really about communicating that between the two of you, is that you obviously value her contribution, doing all that work, which
as we said, I wouldn't be able to do it, and you probably wouldn't be able to do it, be a full-time stay-at-home father. So yeah, we really value that from our respective wives, and it's really just about, you have to communicate that, and from her end, communicating that she's worried about that or doesn't feel as though she is contributing as much. Yeah, you're dead right. And that's kind of what, I guess, most of the time when people come and see us in their 50s, you don't normally see as much of that. What I normally see is more around, there's something that tends to happen with particularly where if a man has been, if the husband has been working full time all his life, and the wife has sort of gone back to work after the kids have left home and are at school. A lot of the time, I don't know why, but the husband in that situation will say, I don't care how long I work for, I just want my wife to be able to retire, which is admirable. But it's again one where normally then when you actually talk to her about it, she's going, I don't care, I'm enjoying work, I'm not that worried.
That's right. I mean, you ask the lady in that situation, and what I've heard in the past is, no, I really value having my own money. Number one,
that's right.
And number two is the social aspects of actually working. So I think that's just normal. That's just a male insecurity thing. I think from having to be the breadwinner or
and like I say, again, it's an admirable thing because it's a bit of not so much martyrdom, but blokes, particularly blokes, we see mainly putting their hand up and going, I'm happy to work however long, I want my wife to be able to stop work whenever she wants. But again, then normally not having that conversation between the two of them, it's just a thought that he's got in his head, and it's only when that comes out that she goes, well, I'm happy to be working and financially contributing and have my own money and not feel as though I'm not contributing in that way. So yeah, you're dead right. I think the main thing with that work or contribution or whatever it is there is that it's about the communication of that and the feeling of making sure that you're both on the same page with what you both want to be doing and what you expect from each other.
The third reason that couples argue over money, different levels of financial literacy is what you have on that.
I think this is one that you see a fair bit, is that in any household, not just when it comes to money, but everyone sort of takes a role, and it's the same in a business, you know what I mean? There's different things that in our business that you're focused on and that you are sort of the go-to person for that, and there's other things that I'm the go-to person for. Usually in a couple you find that one member of that couple has kind of been in charge of the money, or has been that person making those financial decisions. And some of that comes from they may have a greater aptitude for it or a greater interest in it, and that's sort of why they've got handed the reins in that way, or it may just be that they were the one who had the time to handle it. But what you've found, especially when people are in their 50s and coming to see us, is that usually one member of the couple has been in charge of the money, or has been the person looking at it mainly for 30 years now. And so obviously if you spend 30 years thinking about something or looking at something or learning about it, you're going to have a far greater level of financial literacy than the member of the couple who hasn't necessarily been doing that. And that's kind of where we see it as you're in your 50s and moving towards retirement. Some of the strategies that we are talking about with people, they're no more complex than they need to be. And what we do tend to find is one member of the couple will kind of understand. We're trying to break this down as simple as possible. One member of the couple will generally go, yep, that makes perfect sense within 5 minutes. And it may be that the person who isn't usually in charge of that, it takes them a while longer to pick it up, just because they don't have the same level of financial literacy. And so that's one where it's almost easier when we're in the room, because we can sit there and look at the two members of a couple and go, okay, that person understands it, this one doesn't quite yet, I've got to explain it in a different way, or I've got to give them more time, or a different example or something like that. But it's what we do for a job, so it's pretty easy for us to actually see, is the other person understanding this or not? Whereas what you see is more couples where they argue between themselves, is that, like you said before, someone understands something in their own head, and it's really hard for human beings. If we know something in our own head, we can't understand that
we can't understand that the other person doesn't understand it.
Yeah.
And so they get frustrated, or they think that the other person's being obtuse or being difficult, when really they just don't quite understand, or they haven't had the time to process it yet as to how that all works.
The fourth reason that couples argue over money: lack of clear communication.
Yeah, so I think this probably should have gone last and been the overarching theme here, but I think it ties into all these different points, which is that I guess there's two parts. There's clear communication. Is that number one, we just don't talk about it. You know, as a couple, you know what it's like, where you're not sitting there, you know, at 5:30 in the afternoon after you get home from work and after you're trying to organise kids and all the rest of it, or whatever you do, and then sit there and go, hey, let's talk about our superannuation contributions, or let's talk about our money, or it's normally the last thing that you feel like doing.
It is, and I mean, I made the point before that my wife Susie is happy to outsource all of that, and she trusts me. But it's been really good. Like when we've put the kids to bed, we've cracked a bottle of wine and sat down and actually, wouldn't matter what we're talking about probably, but it was the process of actually doing that. But I'd explain to her, you know, what our plans were for money wise for the next year, or the next 2 years, the next 5 years. So I was happy with that. She was happy with that. So it is a good process to go through.
And that's, I think, the first step of that is just having communication in any way, shape or form, which most people don't tend to do. And like I say, we are, even though we're financial planners, you really have to try and carve the time out to talk about this with your spouse. And it's not the first thing that pops up when you have a spare minute together. It's not the most romantic thing to talk about when you've got some time alone. But the second part of it is, I think, like you said, you touched on there, is that when yourself and Susie sit down and talk about these things, this is what you do for a job, is talk about money. So it's obviously very easy for you to clearly articulate the plan and the strategy behind, or the reasoning behind why you're doing what you're doing, all those kinds of things. What we find a lot with couples is that, particularly, as we said, when someone's got a different level of financial literacy, someone might understand a concept or a strategy or something that they want to do financially, but they may not be able to clearly articulate that. And they might not be able to articulate that in a way that the other person can understand. And so it's, I guess, both parts of that is trying to carve out the time to actually communicate between you, but also trying to communicate in a way that makes it as easy as possible for the other person to understand. And that's, as you said before, that's been a big one where we see that a lot of couples, that's a valuable part of our process with them, is that you're without trying to dig into all these things, you're raising issues that they may not have just ever thought about before, and then when those things pop up, you can actually explain that probably a bit clearer and a bit simpler for the other.
Yeah, look, I think it's a fantastic thing. If someone sits down with you and says, look, from my beliefs are this, and if you were to say, okay, well, why I'm worried about putting money away for the future is for so we're secure in the future, and if there's if anything happens, we've got money there that we can fall back on, and so forth. It's very hard to argue with that.
Yeah, that's right.
Again, if Nicola's saying, well, I like to feel that we
enjoy ourselves
this and this now. It's hard to argue with that as well.
Right.
It's all about fitting that around. Like we always say, the balance of life is the answer. It's not extremes in any direction.
Right. Yep.
So the communication, without the communication, you can quite easily and quickly be going, well, why are they like that?
Yeah, that's right. Well, and that's, I guess, the point is that you think about, for most people, you married them for a reason. You know what I mean? You obviously love them. You want to be with them and spending time with them. Something about when it comes to money or these topics where you argue, they're probably not a monster. Like the reason they want to do what they want to do is normally not because I'm a terrible human being. It's probably just that there's some unmet need, or there's some desire that they have for something that they can't clearly articulate, or they can't explain why they want what they want.
Yes.
So it is really a valuable part. What we see is through the process of meeting with us,
initially, but then even on an ongoing basis. As we said before, we meet with all our clients on a 6-monthly basis. That can be a valuable thing more as for a lot of people, once the strategies are all in place and set up, it can almost be a bit of a check-in pseudo marriage counselling type session where you're discussing these things and what's important to different people and why, and getting them to articulate in a sort of dispassionate way why they think what they think and why they want to do the things they want to do, without it being them arguing amongst themselves. You're kind of almost facilitating that communication without any skin in the game, because as we said, it's not whether you choose to go on that holiday now or in 10 years' time. We're not going to go on the holiday with you, so we don't care whether you do it, which one you do. It's just about communicating why you want to do what you want to do.
And recognising that this isn't necessarily an exhaustive list. The fifth and final reason that couples argue over money: different decision-making processes.
Yeah. So this is probably ties into the lack of the clear communication. For most couples, they don't talk about money, and then when they do talk about money, one person in the couple tends to make decisions in a much more, instinctive or quicker, or whatever you want to. They're ready to make a decision straight away, whereas the other person in the couple may not be ready to make a decision in that way, or they may need more time, or they might need to think about this in a different way, or whatever it is. It sort of tends to be one of those things where this is one that we see the best, as we say, the best financial planning is there's no value to it at all without financial doing. And so you can have a couple that talk about money and they carve out the time to talk about it, and they very clearly, articulate their point and do all those things right. Now, if they aren't aware of the way that they each want to be able to make those decisions and how they like to make those decisions, what you find is they end up getting to the end point and someone's pushing the other one to make a decision or to do something a certain way, and then they end up having a blow up about it and nothing ever gets done.
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, the last thing the last point, or one to be aware of, is that once you've worked through that list and you get to that final point, a lot of the time, and we see this with couples who come and see us, it's in some cases you might talk about all these different things and then say, and we can sort of tell, obviously, because we're fairly experienced with this, is that one member of the couple will be pushing to make a decision right there on the spot and go, well, we should do it this way, or we should make this decision, we should do that. And a lot of the time it's kind of our job to go, well, if we can sort of tell that the other person isn't quite sure or doesn't know how they want to do it, or what they think about that yet, or what they're really, the goal they're trying to work towards. Sometimes it's our role to go, we'll just stop and you guys go and think about this for a week, and then we'll meet again in 2 weeks' time and talk about it. And what you find is then we've given that other person a bit of space to be able to make that decision in the way that suits them best, so they don't feel like they're being railroaded into something, or that they feel like they're being rushed into making a decision that's not how they normally make a decision.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I do see that quite a bit as well. And most of the time they are happy to go with what's being recommended.
Yeah.
It's just that they need that
time. Yeah.
The decision-making process is to be able to sit on it for a little while, right. And to let that percolate.
Yeah, that's right. As you say, most of the time, especially if it's my recommendation that I'm making, it's normally right because I'm the best financial planner in Australia. But I think amongst couples, this is one where it's almost easier if we're making a recommendation of you should do this, because for most people that's what they're paying us for. It's our advice.
Yeah.
Where it gets really tricky is when you go, if there's something where there's no right or wrong answer. How much money do you think you'll need in retirement, for example? There's no right or wrong answer. And one member of the couple will pick a number and go, right, that's it, that's what we're going to work towards. And the other one's, well, I just need to think about it and mull it over a bit and think about what I actually want my life to look like in retirement. So you kind of have to almost stop the quick decision maker in that couple from railroading the other one in, and just give them the time and space to work through that decision in their own, and I guess respect that process that they go through to come to that. Because without both members of the couple really feeling like they own that decision and that they have made
decision of their own accord, you're just never going to see any sort of commitment to a plan over long term, which, as we said before, is where all your results happen. So it's very easy to sort of convince someone in that moment, to go, this is what we should do, and sort of railroad them into that without them really feeling as though they've made that decision. But when it gets a bit hard, it's going to then be that person's going to throw their hands up and go, well, I didn't really want to do this anyway, and you sort of decided it. So I think that's a key part, is that as you work through all these, is that coming up with a part of that clear communication is then allowing that time for both members of the couple to really feel like a part of the plan, and to really feel responsible and accountable for their part or their contribution into that.
So wrapping up,
as I say, there's really well worded reasons that couples argue over money. As you said, there's probably a million and one, there's a million and one other reasons that couples argue over money. Yeah. But I think if you thought about, as we see most of the time, when people are arguing, when couples are arguing over money, they don't normally come in and say, we argue about money because our values aren't aligned.
No.
They go, she wants to, redo the kitchen, and I want to buy a boat, and I've got sads about that. It's not about the boat. It's not about the kitchen.
Yeah.
Or, she wants to retire earlier and travel around, and I want to work. Whatever it is, it's normally not. The argument that you're having is normally not about the thing that you're arguing about. It stems back to one of these kind of root causes, if that makes sense. So.
Yeah, look, I think certainly talking about it is the first step.
Yeah.
Look, it would even pay to write things down on a piece of paper as well, so you have it as a record of what you discussed. Which seems silly, but we talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
If you are making a decision that you feel, and you may feel this internally, the other person may think you've had the time to make that decision, but you're feeling a little bit pressured to make that decision.
Yeah.
And you make that decision, and then later on you can say, well, no, I didn't do that. I didn't say that. So if you have it all written down,
that's right. Yeah,
and that would be a good idea as well.
And I think that's right. Even as I think couples discussing money is, and I'm going to go on one of my tangents here that you're going to give me a funny face, but I feel like talking about money with your spouse is a bit like me when I go and train. Is it normally, I don't train, and then when I go and train, I train until I actually injure myself.
Yeah.
And I feel like, so couples don't talk about money, and then when they do talk about money, they want to solve all the problems of the world in half an hour.
Yes.
And they discuss it and discuss it and discuss it until they have a fight about it. Yes. And the natural end point is, well, we're going to end this by fighting about it. It's a bit like kids playing.
Yeah.
Kids play together until one of them hurts the other, and then they cry.
Yeah.
So and that's like you were saying, carving out that time, or making it a process where you might discuss it for half an hour and then go, this is, I think, we've reached a point where we've both said our piece. Let's pause this for a week, or let's pause this. And it's hard to do in that moment because everyone's always, you want to get the last word, or you've always got the next thing that you want to say. So that's a big part of it for me, is that I think it would be, and like you've said before, having a meeting with a financial advisor for a lot of people is probably great for that, just because there is some structure to that. Like, we wouldn't just let people argue for 3 years about money in our meeting room. We'd be kicking them out. So there is an end point in sight, so people can say what's on their chest. They can say to their spouse what they think, and then they move on and go and talk about something else, and then come back to it once they've had time to work through it. Yes. So that's I guess the thing is that I'd say, make the time, but you really don't want it to be a one-off thing. You want it to be pick a time, pick a good, calm time that you can actually discuss this, and then talk about it for a little bit, and then put it on hold, and then come back to it when you're again both calm and ready to talk about it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Lighthouse Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.